Good day, ladies and gentlemen, fellow conferees. It's my pleasure to participate in this conference. I am Dr. Alexander Onwuna, and from the University of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, Umago, Nigeria. And my paper is co-authored with a colleague from Imo State Polytechnic, Omoma, same Nigeria, and it is Andrew Eno Amadi, PhD. Our subject of research is literature as a pedagogical instrument for patriotic reorientation for national security and sustainable development. A reading of Nnamdi Anubiye's The Last of the Patriots. Our research is primarily aimed at critically examining the problem of patriotism. And we are aware that this research actually is a critical examination, and it is informed by the increased global and national insecurity and the extent to which such insecurity affects sustainable development. In fact, sustained patriotism is indeed the panacea to current ravaging insecurity and its attendant effects on the economy and development. And this can vitally be achieved through teaching of literature, especially novels with moral rectitude of patriotism and statement. The purpose of our research is primarily to contextualize patriotism in national security and development. We have three basic objectives in the course of the research, and the first is to investigate portrayal of the various forms of patriotism. Second, we wish to examine the role of literature in patriotic reorientation. And third, is our objective to establish the nexus between literature, patriotism, national security, and sustainable development. Introduction. One of the challenges of human race, especially Africa and Nigeria in particular, is insecurity. In fact, insecurity, we all know, is a concept almost at the lips of everybody, the educated and non-educated. Not for any reason at all, but because every day people feel its impacts and negative impacts on daily basis. And this impacts is felt in all human endeavors. In order to understand properly what we are saying, we need to know what actually is insecurity. Of course, there are many experts' definition of what insecurity is, but we'll just take one, and that is the one advanced by Achumba and Iwemerere, and that advancement was made in 2013. These experts define insecurity as the risk of danger or threat of danger, a state of being exposed to risk or anxiety. If you look at the pictures there, you would see men and women running away from fire outbreak, which is caused by bomb blast. We also see the other picture, the army checking men and women that are passing, searching them, requesting from them hands up. That is a period of curfew because of insecurity in the land in Nigeria. So curfew was imposed, and every passerby is meant to be checked. We showed you people that are already armed, who are terrorists, and these arms got into their hands through transporter. It was imported by who sponsors them or by themselves. Another cause of insecurity is drug addiction. And you can see from the picture drugs that are addicted, needle which drug addicts use to inject themselves, and so on and so forth. Of course, we know the terrorists always survive with drugs to empower them, to give them strength, to make them high, and so on and so forth. The actions that they engage themselves in, most times they are not the controller of their actions. And that is why they could kill without any form of sympathy, and so on and so forth. Other causes are weak judicial system. You could see from the picture, lawyers, these are Nigerian lawyers, by extension African lawyers. Most times people don't get justice when they are supposed to get it. And of course they say justice delayed is justice denied. Many times we have observed that many people don't get justice. Sometimes it's either delayed or denied. And when people wait to infinity without getting justice, you see them taking arms. You see them involving in demonstrations. And such demonstrations end up in destruction of life and properties. Economic imbalance or development imbalance is another cause of insecurity. For instance, in Nigeria, some states are referred to as Nada Delta, and those states produce oil. The irony of the whole thing is that the states that produce oil don't have direct impacts of the oil produced in their land. We see cases where their land is ravaged by oil spillage, their farms spoiled, their rivers polluted, their streams polluted, and so on and so forth. And when they feel that they are not benefiting directly from what is produced from their land, you see them engaging in either militancy or any form of social vices to attract the attention of the government. Another cause is corruption and unemployment. You could see the man on suit in the picture taking bribe from the back. Of course, most of them do like this, especially employers, especially those in the director cadre in the government and so on and so forth. They take bribes to get some people employed. And when such happens, people could revolt. People could involve in demonstration to press home their demand. On the other picture, you see young boys and girls looking for employment. You can see what looked like a stampede. You see thousands of people looking for a job. They are holding their application letter and credentials about to submit, but nobody is attending to them. If in the end they are not attended to, or they do not get the job, what else do you expect? Many of them will take to criminality. Many of them will take to other social vices, and the after effect both on the citizens and the economy. We also have traumatic events that can cause serious insecurity. One, he is troubled in the mind, could end up seeing himself as a rejected person. From the picture, you could see the girl and the man heavily traumatized. They do not know what to do. They are having health challenges. Perhaps no money to even take care of the health challenges. And they don't have option than to do what? Than to try a way the other way. And the other way could be disastrous. You can also see a man who has always destroyed himself with drug addiction. And that drug addiction is a very serious problem, possibly to ease himself of the pains and sorrows of unemployment. Another factor is social conditioning. You can see the other picture, which is a Nigerian state suffering insecurity. You see people leaving their own states, their own hometown, their own villages, taking refuge in another country, in another place, in another state. You can see large number of people trooping away from their homes because of insecurity. In the end, they turn to be displaced and women. Now, in spite of all this insecurity that we have seen and the causes of them, we have hope, and our hope only lies in literature. In fact, it is regrettably devastating, and the aftermath of insecurity is what sometimes is unimaginable. But our hope is on literature is not completely lost. Why? Because literature is a very feasible and functional solution on patriotic reorientation. The reorientation that can only come through pedagogical instrumentality of same literature. Now, from the pre-colonial era of Africa and Nigeria, literature has played and still plays this significant role. For instance, during pre-colonial era, you see Olaudah Equiano, who tells us in his interesting narrative of his life, published in 1789. He exhibited form of heroism, form of patriotism, willingness for his hometown. And you can see a picture of the back cover of the novel. During colonial era as well, Chidera Achebe's Things Fall Apart demonstrated that homeliness, that willingness to recreate his home, his town, his people, their culture. That also what Peter Abraham does in My Boy, published in 1946. So you could see Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, the image of the book Things Fall Apart. You see during post-colonial era too, a creative artist like Wole Soyinka, in his interpreters, related to the patriotism that is required. Actually, we could have corrupt officials there, but the main target was to show the extent to which lack of patriotism could affect the system, could affect the nation, could affect people. You could see the novel there, Wole Soyinka's Interpreters. But in the contemporary time, many creative artists have taken bold steps to reflect the essences of using literature to project patriotism. For instance, Bichie Meta Destination Africa is one of the novels that has achieved that. You can see the cover of the novel. You can see a man there trying to escape problem that has arisen in his town. And when the problem was over, he has to retire to his own town in the spirit of patriotism. And our book, our novel of criticism, which is Anumihi's The Last of the Patriots, is also a contemporary novel that discusses the essence of patriotism to nation building, to national security and development. You can see the soldiers there on the cover who are patriots. You can see the youth corps members in Nigeria reflecting quality patriotism. Now, having said that in the introduction, there are some concepts we need to explain for the benefit of comprehensive understanding. And those concepts are literature, patriotism, national security, and development. Of course, there are as many experts as possible that have critically examined those concepts. But we would, for the sake of time and space, look at one of those expert views. In the main work, you will see the bulk of expert view of all these concepts. First, literature. For Ezaka, he refers literature as an artistic expression of human culture and history, an imagination of work of art that presents both the pleasant and unpleasant sides of life, the realities and unrealities of human life, and in fact a way of life, the expression of imaginative power of man, in which he reflects on life with a universal interest. This universal interest is actually the real essence of quality literature, quality novel. Of course, patriotism is of universal concern. Everywhere in the world, non-patriots do a lot of harm, and there is renewed advocacy for patriotism. And that is where universal interest comes in. Now, patriotism by Nathanson, who is a professor of philosophy, in one of his works, he emphasized four main aspects of patriotism in the understanding. For him, patriotism means special affection for one's own country, a sense of personal identification with the country, special concern for well-being of the country, and above all, the willingness to sacrifice to promote the country's good. The country's good is always paramount within the context of patriotism. National security. For Paleri, he defines national security as a measurable state of the capacity of a nation to overcome the multidimensional threats to the apparent well-being of its people and its survival as a nation state at a given time by balancing all instruments of state policy through governance, and is extended to global security by variables external to it. Finally, development. Rudney is one of the greatest critics of African underdevelopment, and he writes in his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And in that book, he defines development. And according to him, development is increased skill and capacity, great freedom, creativity, self-discipline, responsibility, and material well-being. You could see what he means by increased skill. That is the capacity for people to do what? To be able to do what they are supposed to do for themselves and for the nation. Of course, such capacity functions greatly with greater freedom. And greater freedom necessitates ability to creativity. But within the context of this creativity, self-discipline is needed. Of course, self-discipline relates to patriotism. Self-discipline, because one who is not disciplined is not patriotic. A patriotic person will always be disciplined. And above all, within the context of discipline, he needs to be responsible for the material well-being of himself and his nation. Now, let us examine the novel. And basic aspects in which we are going to assess it is patriotism and patriots. Let us look at them as it is looked at in the novel, The Last of the Patriots. The Last of the Patriots, of course, is an artistic experimentation of what a patriot is, his characteristics, patriotism, and its realistic application, as well as its forms and manifestations. This idea is unlike the portrayal of patriotism in pre-colonial, post-colonial era, and colonial era, because within that time, they were concerned with the regeneration of their culture, the addressing of one social problem, the attack of colonialism on their culture and their life, and then self-identification, identifying one's root. But in this, The Last of the Patriots, which is a contemporary novel, the novelist rather does what we call experimentation. But that is experimentation is more complex, more scientific, more analytical, and reorientation than it were in the novels of Achebe, the novels of Oluwade Kweado, the novels of Wole Soyinka, and so on and so forth. Now, according to the novelist, he defines patriotism as simply the love for one's country, such that one is prepared to die for his country. Furthermore, he defined patriotism as a means of obeying the law. He said patriotism for him means obeying the law, rules and regulations of one's country. Patriotism for him also means stopping smuggling runs at these other borders by security personnel. Patriotism for him finally means apprehending smugglers by security officers. Now, from his definition, we could see different aspects and ramifications, forms of patriotism. One, it is not only one who loves his country, but that love has to be bedrocked in obeying the law, rules and regulations of that country. It's not enough to obey the rules, but you need to put into practice what look like obeying the law. And it has to do with stopping smuggling runs and other social vices. But stopping such is a sole responsibility of both the government and security personnel. Arresting them and prosecuting them is a very important aspect of patriotism. Now, the other forms of patriotism is defending the defenseless. For instance, you see Chid, who is one of the major characters, rescuing Jennifer, who is a colleague in the university, from the clutches of cultists. Again, we also discover in the novel, Chid successfully wrestled out Mama Ike stolen huge money from hoodlums. Now, one of the occasions, of course, Chid had to, after camp, he passed out from camp and then met Mama Ike, where he went to buy drink and food. But in the course of between that, hoodlums ravaged that place and took away the woman's bag. And inside the bag is huge amount of money. But Chid has to demonstrate quality patriotism by not only attacking them back, but also wrestling out the woman's stolen money. And just like as it has been said, that one good turn deserves another, Nkechi, who is the daughter of the woman, Mama Ike, now had to also rescue Chid when Chid was heavily and seriously sick. hungry, and castrated. Now, another serious form of patriotism is quality service delivery. And such quality service delivery stems from service for the nation to service to fellow human beings. And Chid and Jennifer are typical, archetypal characters that exhibited that. Chid serves Fabian. He is apprenticed to Fabian because he wants to be an entrepreneur, he wants to be independent. And Fabian is the CEO of Galaxy Electronics worldwide. But in the course of apprenticeship, Chid exhibited uncommon sincerity, dedication, and utmost conscientiousness. And these virtues are, of course, virtues that are linked to patriotism. Jennifer, in the same vein, is employed by J.L. Truman, and Truman is the chief CSO of Sea-Line Ventures. But one thing is clear, just like Chid, Jennifer also exhibited unique and exceptional devotion, veracity, and frankness, to the extent that she has to grow in the company as a director. Chidi's also conscientiousness and dedication had to attract the attention of his boss, Ichie Fabian, that Ichie Fabian has to make him not only his PA, but also his head. Another important aspect of patriotism that is not too obvious but significant and silent is ambitious ardor, crave, and predilection for self-employment, self-reliance, and entrepreneurship. And Chid and Jennifer exemplify this perception. Both of them share common ideology of self-employment, self-reliance, and entrepreneurship. And you see them not only sharing the vision, but also making effort to apply it in their life. And that is why she had to leave his certificates and go for apprenticeship to Fabian Du. And of course, both Jennifer and Chid are able to achieve their dreams. Now, the reason for their entrepreneurship and self-reliance is not only to get themselves acquainted with the reality of life, but they want to define their destiny as well as define other people's destiny in life. And if you read the book, you will see the greater things that they say. He becomes he becomes a medical doctor. And the reason for that is to enable him ensure that people are treated of their illnesses, whether it's Ebola, whether it's coronavirus, and so on and so forth. And that is made possible by her. But they also are used because the youths constitute the nation's functional labor force with egalitarian perspective. Most of these vices, terrorism, kidnapping, armed robbery, and so on and so on, are of course done by the youths. But for youths to now be used as archetypes and prototype of terrorism, they are now projected as prototypes, significations of patriotism. And so we can see from their character a prism of patriotism. Now, let us look at the nexus between literature, patriotism, national security, and sustainable development. These concepts for us are heavily integral. First, literature is the raw material for patriotism. Patriotism is identified in characters and characterization, while while national security is the implementation of the exhibition of characters. And on the other hand, development is the achievement of thematic preoccupation of literature. Literature is educator and moral standard pace setter on patriotism, while national security and sustainable development are the resultant positive effects of education via literature. Ladies and gentlemen, it's high time we conclude. So in our conclusion, we cannot but say that the last of the patriots is a Nigerian and by extension African novel. But not just African novel, but African novel with global thematic concerns. Of course, patriotism is a global concern. And the novel discusses the primary problem of Nigeria and Africa countries currently facing the countries. And that problem is lack of patriotism, which affects every stratum of its development: security, economy, politics, and so on. Therefore, the novel is not only a criticism of the consequences of unpatriotism, but a serious clarion call for reorientation towards. From the foregoing, it's our pleasure, therefore, to make recommendations. So on that, we recommend as follows. The other recommendations are actually in the long work, but we need to only state three. One, literature, of course. Literary art makes for peace, for order, for discipline, for refinement, for unity, and for reorientation. Therefore, the government of Nigeria and other African countries should see the urgent need to explore the instrumentality of literature in pedagogical orientation, especially now that it seems that other means, other strategies, other apparatus they have used have failed. Two, literature is a veritable avenue for acculturation of the young. It is better to catch them young, they say. The national ethics are threatened by this lack of acculturation through literature. Therefore, writers of African and Nigerian genealogy should take up the challenge and redirect the artistic thematic preoccupation in that regard. Finally, there ought to be a way of reconciling the communal values which emphasize fellow feeling, love, humanness, and human welfare with industrial values which emphasizes productivity and development. And this gap is actually a problem. The gap between the communal values and the industrial values. Because they are not reconciled, we continue to see the problem that we are having today in Africa and in Nigeria. Of course, that reconciliation can be achieved by making literature compulsory to undergraduate students of any discipline in the form of general studies, possibly at all levels. The new core curriculum, minimum academic standard, now brought out by NUC, is for us a very serious aberration because it has limited communication in English only to first semester. And so it will not be enough to address the core needs of Nigerian nation, especially now, critical time of now when they require patriotic orientation. Therefore, NUC need to revisit that its stand if it really wishes Nigeria well and would want reconciliation of communal values and industrial values. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure. I wish to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.